February 2022, a woman named Elvira Nebulina sat in Moscow and watched everything she had warned about come true at once. She was the governor of the Russian Central Bank, Cambridge educated, widely regarded as one of the most technically skilled economists on earth, and for years, quietly, persistently, she had been telling the Kremlin the same thing. Russia was too exposed, too dependent on Western financial infrastructure. If something went wrong, the consequences wouldn't be slow, they'd be instant. The Kremlin didn't listen. 72 hours after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, $300 billion in Russian sovereign reserves, money held in accounts across Europe and the United States, were frozen overnight. No court order, no treaty, no warning. Gone. Everything she had warned about in 72 hours. But here's what's really crazy. The story of how that was even possible. How one decision could freeze a country's entire savings overnight. The story begins not in Moscow, not in Washington, but in Riyadh in 1974 with a man named Henry Kissinger and a deal that rewired the entire financial ecosystem of the planet. In 1971, Nixon goes on television and shocks the world. The United States has just abandoned the gold standard. The dollar is no longer backed by anything physical. No gold, no commodity, nothing. Every economist says the same thing. The dollar is finished. They were wrong. And the reason why tells you everything about how real power actually works. Because here's what those economists missed. A currency doesn't need to be backed by gold to remain powerful. It just needs to be necessary. The kind of necessity that you can't opt out of. And 3 years after Nixon's announcement, Henry Kissinger figured out exactly how to do that. By 1974, Kissinger flies to Riyadh. The offer he brings is simple. The United States will sell Saudi Arabia advanced weapons. The US will guarantee the security of the Saudi royal family, protection against any enemy, internal or external. In exchange, Saudi Arabia agreed to one condition. All oil, every barrel, from every sale, to every country on earth, gets priced in US dollar. Only dollars, always. Now think about what that actually means. Every country on earth needs oil. Japan needs it. Germany needs it. Bangladesh, Brazil, South Korea, Nigeria, all of them, without exception. To buy oil, they first need to acquire US dollars, which means every country on earth now has a permanent and structural need for the American dollar. Not because they chose it, not because the dollar was the strongest or the most trustworthy, but because Kissinger had just made it the only option. It wasn't a currency deal, it was a hostage deal. By 1977, over 80% of global trade was settled in US dollars. The dollar didn't earn this position, it was engineered into it, through an agreement, in one city, between two governments that the rest of the world had no say in whatsoever. That is the real system Elvira was born into, and she understood, earlier than almost anyone else, exactly how dangerous it was to depend on it. For 48 years, the system worked exactly as designed. Countries need oil. Oil requires dollars. Dollars require access to American financial system. And America, quietly and consistently, held the key. Then came 2012, and America showed the world what those keys could actually do. But first, you need to understand something that almost nobody explains correctly. Here's what SWIFT actually is. It's not a bank. It's not money. It's a messaging system. That's it. A secured encrypted messaging network connecting over 11,000 financial institutions across 200 countries, allowing them to send payment instruction to each other, like email. Except this email moves $5 trillion every single day. Now, what happens if you actually get cut off from this email system? Your bank can't communicate with foreign banks. Foreign banks can't communicate with you. Import payments stop clearing. Export payments stop arriving. Companies can't pay suppliers. Suppliers stop shipping. The economy doesn't slow down. It's sized, not slowly, overnight. In 2012, the United States and European Union disconnect Iran from SWIFT. No declaration of war. No military action. One decision, one system. Within 6 months, Iran's oil exports collapsed by 60%. The Irani rial lost half its value. Inflation exploded. The economy exploded. All without a single missile. The weapon worked perfectly, and Nebulina was watching. She had spent years running the numbers. War scenarios, sanction scenarios, financial isolation scenarios. She kept arriving at the same conclusion. Russia's exposure to the dollar system wasn't just a risk. It was a structural vulnerability. The kind that, if triggered, couldn't be managed in real time, only prevented in advance. In 2014, after Russia's annexation of Crimea triggered a small round of Western sanctions, she accelerated her warnings. Russia needed to reduce its dollar reserve. Russia needed an alternative payment system. Russia needed to be able to function, if it was even cut off from the SWIFT system entirely. The Kremlin listened, partially, not enough. February 24, 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. 27 hours later, the call is made. $300 billion, Russian sovereign wealth, accumulated over years of oil revenue, stored in accounts across Western financial institutions, managed by the central bank Nebulina had spent a decade running, gone. Not stolen, but frozen. There's a difference. Stolen means it's over. The money is gone, and the relationship is severed. Frozen means someone else permanently holds the key. The money is there, but Russia simply cannot touch it, cannot spend it, cannot move it, cannot use it for anything ever, unless the West decides otherwise. Russia didn't lose a war. Russia lost access to the messaging system, and the consequences were immediate. Every financial minister on earth watched it happen. Every central bank governor, every sovereign wealth fund manager, every treasury officer in the country that has ever had a complicated relationships with Washington, and there are many. They all watched $300 billion disappear from a country's economy in 72 hours. Without a trial, without any treaty, without a vote. And every single one of them asked the same question Nebulina had asked for years. What stops that from being us? And the answer was nothing. And that changed everything. December 2022. 10 months after the invasion, Xi Jinping flies to Riyadh. He stands before the Gulf Cooperation Council, the same body of Gulf states that have priced oil exclusively in US dollars since the Kissinger deal, and says on camera, in public, China will work to buy oil and gas in yuan. Let that land for a second. In 1974, Kissinger flew to Riyadh and locked the world into dollars. In 2022, Xi flies to the same city and offers a way out. The Saudi didn't say no. March 2023, Saudi Aramco, the world's largest oil company, settles its first oil trade in Chinese yuan, quietly, no press release, no announcement. But it happened. For the first time in 50 years, a barrel of oil changed hands without a single dollar involved. The petrodollar system that Kissinger built in 1974 is cracking, for the first time in half a century. But the more important development is less visible than a Saudi oil deal. In 2022, a project called M-Bridge runs a test. The UAE, China, Hong Kong, and Thailand move more money across borders. Real money, real transaction, zero SWIFT, $0. $22 million cleared without touching the American financial system at all. $22 million. That's nothing. In global financial terms, that's just a rounding error. Except, it proves the alternative infrastructure works. The pipes exist. The transaction clears. The system is functional. And once you prove something works, you cannot unprove it. The engineers know how to do it. The banks know it clears. The governments know it's real. The exit is there, and now it's being scaled. Here's the thing America cannot admit. The thing that makes it not just a problem, but a trap with no clear exit. Every sanction makes the next sanction weaker. Iran taught the world that SWIFT is a weapon. Russia taught the world the weapon has no ceiling. That even $300 billion in sovereign reserves isn't safe. Now every country that America might ever sanction, every country that has ever had difficult relationships with Washington, is quietly building the exit before they even need it. The weapon works by surprise. you get one surprise. America already used it up. And Nebulina, sitting in Moscow, watching the yuan oil trade clear, watching BRICS go live, watching the architecture she spent a decade trying to build inside Russia, now being built across the entire developing world, understood what it means before people in Washington. The country that lost the most when the dollar was weaponized are now the countries building the alternatives the fastest. Russia, China, the Gulf states. Brazil is settling with China directly. The entire BRICS bloc accelerating financial infrastructure specifically designed to route around the American system. The irony is brutal. The harder America squeezes, the faster the alternatives get built. The more the weapon is used, the more the world learns to live without it. Henry Kissinger spent 1974 building a system that made the dollar mandatory for every country on earth, elegant in its simplicity. Structurally, it was permanent. It ran itself for 50 years. He spent his final years warning that America was destroying it. He said it publicly, in interviews, in essays, in conversations with policymakers. Overusing financial sanctions was teaching the world to build an alternative. The dollar's reserve status was not guaranteed. It required restraint, and restraint was one thing Washington had stopped showing. Nobody listened. Kissinger died in November 29, 2023. 6 months later, BRICS completed its 5-year commercial pilot. Real bank, real money. China, the UAE, Thailand, Hong Kong, moving value across borders without a single dollar or swift messaging involved. The man who built the cage didn't live to see the door open, but the door is opening. And Nebulina, she is still at the Russian Central Bank, still running the numbers, still building alternatives. Not just for Russia, but as a blueprint that half the developing world is copying. The economist nobody listened to became the economist everyone is following. America didn't lose the dollar's dominance in battle. It lost it one sanction at a time. And the crazy part, it genuinely cannot stop. Because the moment it stops using the weapon, the deterrence disappears. And the moment it keeps using it, more countries build an exit faster. Tighten the grip, the world pulls away harder. Loosen the grip, the deterrence collapses. There is no clear move. That's not a strategy. That's an addiction.